They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Joining us, and welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka.
And we have lots to talk about. It's a busy week. It's a busy time. I don't ever think the news cycle slows down anymore. And Katie, let's start with the natural disaster, because this Hurricane Helene has been absolutely horrifying to see. I know you lived in North Carolina for a time. My mom was born. I still have family in North Carolina. It is such a beautiful state, but it really caught the brunt of Hurricane Helene, even though it had downgraded from how big it was as a Category 4 when it made landfall. The flooding was absolutely insane, intense, and there are still people without cell phone service, without fresh water, who are still stuck, and over 100 people who have already died.
The images are horrifying. Yes, I grew up part of my childhood in Asheville, North Carolina, which seems to be point zero for the ground zero for a lot of the flooding. I couldn't believe those images of like whole sections of the interstate that have just dropped into the river, and the pictures of Lake Lure just absolutely covered in debris. And where's the president in all of this? I have to ask, where is President Biden? Where is Vice President Harris? I'm just not hearing word one from them. I'm not seeing them down there with supplies. I mean, this is one of the worst natural disasters that's actually hit the country in a while. And they are silent. And yet President Trump, I think, is going down there.
He's been there.
Just been there, right? As
we record today, it is definitely two different paths in how they cover this. It is a lot of people have said that this is the most devastating hurricane that we've had in 50 years, which when you think about Katrina, that was pretty darn devastating. But the scope of this, I think, is a little bit, it's larger. We did hear from Joe Biden, who said that he would be traveling as soon as it was safe to go to North Carolina, and not just safe, but, they also worry about the resources that have to be diverted to get the president in and out. So he said he'll be going later in the week. Kamala Harris, not much from her, but it is always interesting to see Donald Trump jump into action. President Trump always jumps into action when there are disasters like this. And he went to Valdosta, Georgia, I believe, on Monday, and brought with him supplies. He came and said, this is beyond politics. We have a big race that we're running in. But he said right now, the big focus is to make sure that everybody can rebuild and get bigger and better and stronger than ever before. And that is very consistent with the Trump message when he has dealt with natural disasters, both as president and as a candidate. He doesn't shy away from going and bringing fresh water and resources to people and bring some attention to those of us who aren't directly affected by this. It's really important. It's one of the things he does really well. And it's also one of the things that Biden and Kamala Harris do not do very well. It's a stark contrast between the way these two handle these kinds of things.
You just get the sense that they can't be bothered. I mean, the fact as well that she would not go down to the border forever. You know, what else I think is interesting about Trump, and I think it really underscores the sort of sincerity and authenticity of his response, is that he does this both for natural disasters, but there are countless stories of him doing this in the case of individual crises, right? When an individual or a family, when something terrible happens, he has often stepped in and responded and helped in a very personal way. So, I think it's in his bones. I don't think it's political at all. I really don't.
And, if it were, he could come in and get his photo opportunity and leave, which is very much what Kamala Harris did when she went to the border, which we'll talk about in a few moments. That was a disgrace. But what President Trump did when he was in Georgia on Monday, not only did he bring resources, not only did he bring money, not only did he bring attention and encouraging words to the people, but Katie, he made a phone call while he was there. One of the things that has been a huge piece, and a warning, by the way, to all of us, is that many areas that were impacted by this storm do not have any connection with the outside world. Their cell phones are down. They can't get fresh water. They can't get search and rescue in. They can't get the help they need because they're just literally in a cell phone blackout. And look, I know we all love our cell phones, but this is what happens when you become addicted to just one form of technology. When it goes down, you're in trouble. And I know I spend a lot of my time on AM radio, and this is one of the initiatives that's important for our company, which is to keep AM radio still in cars. While podcasting is great and we love doing this show, it's a very important piece for when emergencies happen. I heard a woman today who was in North Carolina. She was on Fox News on Monday morning, and she said, everything is not okay, and we need radios here. If we had radios, things would be a whole lot better. And so it really does still underscore the importance of that medium, even when people look at it as old and outdated. But Trump, back to him, calls Elon Musk and asks for Elon to bring Starlink down to Georgia and North Carolina so that these people can actually communicate with one another and check on their families. And he got Elon Musk on the phone while he was in Georgia, and he said that Elon's going to be trying to make that happen. That is what a leader does, is going in, finding out what the needs are that we're not even thinking about, and then finding a solution for them. So we'll see what happens with that.
Absolutely. And I just, I have to say on that note, our family, we all got satellite phones. So we have backup satellite. And I do think it's really interesting that everybody lost their cell service. And I'm kind of surprised that there aren't more AM radios, because I feel like a radio is, and I didn't really understand why, but radios are always a part of emergency preparedness kits. So, maybe this will help underscore for people, you got to have it. You need to be prepared.
Yeah, there's a huge effort to take AM radios out of cars. And even right now, people don't have them in their homes. So what happens if your cell phone goes down? You guys will be okay. You have your satellite phones. And I think that's so smart. It's a backup, but not everybody has that. And so the great thing about radio is it does keep you connected, or at least give you the information so that you know what's going on, what's coming, and all of that. So it was interesting to see Trump there, though. And I'm glad he made that call to Elon. I'm loving them as a dream team. And actually, before we get into the news, some of the other news this week, I read a story, I don't know if you saw it, where they were saying that Elon Musk and Tesla's Cybertruck has become a symbol for right-wing conservative extremists. Have you seen this?
No, but I have to tell you, we were just up in New Hampshire, and even driving around northern New Hampshire, driving around everywhere in Virginia, I see those Cybertrucks everywhere. They've got to be flying out of the dealership.
And no offense to Elon, I love Elon Musk. I do. I think that he's done a great job for X, that he's very smart. I think those things are so ugly. So I hope they're not a sign of right-wing people, because I'm not getting one of those. Not doing it.
No. But I think it's a guy thing, because the guys seem to love them. My husband loves it. Cool. I agree with you. I think that is not a pretty car.
It makes me feel like I'm in Star Wars or something, which I guess may be why some of the guys love them. I know. Your husband especially. I know that about him. Yeah. So, I don't know. But I also think this is a great reminder to tell people that you have to buy products that you just really love. Because think about in 2018, how many liberals loved the Tesla, right? And they went out and they just got the Tesla. They were virtue signaling all of us. And now Elon has come out as this great conservative. He's endorsed President Trump. It makes you wonder if they still love their Teslas or not. I guess we'll find out. All right. So that's the hurricane. Let's go to the VP debate, because that'll be the next big story. And we'll talk about Kamala going to the border as well. But the vice presidential debate is set to happen on Tuesday evening. J.D. Vance, Senator from Ohio, and Governor Tim Walz from Minnesota will square off on CBS. I am excited for this one. I actually think this one is going to be more fun for me to watch than even the Kamala and Trump one. I hope that J.D. Vance just wipes the floor with Tim Walz. I think that he will. And I can't wait for this one. I don't know why this one excites me even more than the Trump and Harris one did. Katie, what are you expecting to see from the debate?
And uncertainty are everywhere we turn. Many Americans have grown increasingly tired of the reckless fiscal spending, mounting national debt, and the looming threat to the dollar. With never-ending political and global conflicts, Americans are looking for a way out of the fragile paper system and craving a trustworthy asset to help protect their savings. That's why they turn to gold, specifically a gold IRA from Augusta Precious Metals. If you have over $100,000 in a retirement account, it's time you learned about the potential benefits of a gold IRA from Augusta Precious Metals. Augusta Precious Metals is a world-class organization that prides itself on top-notch service. Ready to learn more? Get your free guide on gold IRAs today by calling 855-222-6994. Volatility is everywhere. Now is the time to take control of your retirement to secure a brighter financial future with Augusta Precious Metals. Call them at 855-222-6994 today. I think it'll be more full of surprises just because we've had so little opportunity to hear directly from either man. And so it's going to be, it's kind of an unknown territory in a lot of ways. I mean, we know a little bit about Waltz. We know something about Vance, but we've really not seen them up against each other. I think it's going to be fascinating. And I'm kind of surprised, like we keep doing a series of like debate watch parties, right? And this one is not getting as much interest as the presidential, although we're getting a lot more young people to this one, which I find really interesting. But I think it's going to be really fascinating. I agree with you. I think Vance is going to wipe the floor with Waltz. I just think Waltz is, I'm sorry, he's not a real man.
He's something's weird with Tim Walz. Yeah. We're going to see how they do. I think that it's going to be substantive. I do think that JD Vance has a real opportunity to show his sense of humor, and I'm excited for the country to see that. I'm also excited because the last few debates, I've been working them. And so it's a different mode. I'm excited to just watch as a viewer rather than as someone who is going to have to comment on everything. So that'll be interesting to see. There's a couple of scandals actually that are leading us to the VP debate. The first involves the VA, where apparently now there's a probe into the VA because a few staffers went in and viewed the records of both Tim Walz and JD Vance. Not sure what they were looking for, maybe for the gotcha, but both of the candidates had their records accessed. So it wasn't like it was just one or the other. And now the VA is saying that they're having to dive in to figure this out, who did it and why, what they were looking for.
I just want to say, under President Trump, Robert Wilkie took over as Secretary of the VA, did an absolutely incredible job of whipping that organization into order. He fired thousands of utterly incompetent employees, got it working so much better for our veterans. And what did the Biden administration do? They came in and rehired all those employees with back pay. So
disgusting.
Again, it's going to be one more highly weaponized, highly inefficient, politicized government agency.
Yep, which is probably why we're seeing a lot of this. Yep. Now, the other scandal, and this one is pretty interesting. I think I've heard of Primanti Brothers. I hope I'm saying that right. But it's a very famous sandwich shop. It's a chain in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, I think Maryland as well. Do you have them in Virginia?
No.
Okay.
Not that I've seen.
It's a well-known sandwich shop. JD Vance was in Pennsylvania and was supposed to go do a campaign stop there. A lot of people were at the restaurant that they were going to, had placed their orders already for sandwiches. And when JD Vance arrived, they told them that he couldn't come in. And they said it wasn't political. They just were kind of staying away from this. And JD Vance, I'm telling you, this was a testament to his character. He, instead of getting angry or putting him on blast, he basically paid for everybody's lunch that was there, tipped the wait staff, said, we understand people's decision, made a few remarks outside, and then took off. Well, it turns out that a few months ago, Primanti Brothers had a visit from Kamala Harris, and she was allowed inside. So perhaps it was political. Oh. And it's unfortunate to see that. But I do think that JD Vance deserves some respect for how he handled it, because it could have been something far worse. The fact that he bought the sandwiches, tipped the staff, and by the way, reminded them no tax on tips if Trump is elected. I think it was a great opportunity. And it showed, I think he actually got more attention from that than if it had gone off as planned.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So next up on our list of news stories, Vice President Harris went to, well, she was in my neck of the woods. She was in Los Angeles fundraising over the weekend. But before she got here, Katie, she went to Arizona for a 20-minute trip to the border.
Are you serious? Was it really literally 20 minutes?
20 minutes. And
Oh.
In fact, Border Patrol and ICE officers actually accused her of just coming in for a photo opportunity, which is exactly what she did. The New York Post got her because apparently she showed up wearing a $62,000 necklace while she walked the border, which, by the way, is more than most of our cars, right? I mean, it's just silly, silly stuff. Before we jump into what she did while she was there and what she said, if you were advising the Harris campaign, this is what I often think to myself, and believe me, I am not advising Kamala Harris. Would you tell her with 30 days before the election to go back to the scene of the crime? I mean, she's a border czar. She hasn't done anything to secure the border. She hasn't attempted to do anything to secure the border. And now, 30 days before the election, she's going to show up for 20 minutes to take a picture. I just think it's a bad look all the way around. And I don't think you win people over. I don't think you win influence for that. I think it looks so cheap.
But it's also, I mean, she's getting terrible advice, but she also has a terrible instinct. If you're going to go, you do not go for 20 minutes. You got to know that you're opening yourself up for criticism. And I'm sorry, but if she's on the campaign trail, I don't even think she should be wearing a $62,000 necklace. I mean, this is just, we all keep talking about the fact that today's Democratic Party has become the party of the elites, and the Republican Party is the party of the working class. And I just think it just shows how utterly out of touch she is that she would wear that.
Yeah, it's just so short-sighted, and it shows that they don't care. They can be elitist, and that's why I think you can say that the Democrats are owning their status as the party of the elites in our country right now. Yeah. But she went to the border, and she made a comment that in a speech that she gave after she visited, that if you want her to do something about the fentanyl crisis, that you're going to have to get her elected first. Again, insulting this messaging from Kamala Harris when she's been the border czar for 4 years. She's never uttered the F word. She's never uttered fentanyl until now when she is on the campaign trail. How dare you try to present yourself to the American people saying you have to get me elected so I can help you with these problems? Well, you didn't help us for the past 4 years. I just have faith in the American people that they are smarter than that. And sadly, I think some of them are not, but I do believe the bulk of us can see through what's happening right now.
Yeah. And I think that's why you see the numbers shifting. There just seems to be really a gradual decline in her support and a rise in Trump's support. So I think you're absolutely right.
Now on to Latino voters, because that's been a big piece of the conversation since Kamala Harris went to the border. It seems that President Trump has picked up quite a lot of support with Latino voters across the country. If you look at the polling, he's not beating them, but he's up to 40%, which is about 19 points higher than he was in 2020. This is a huge shift. And I've said for a long time, living in California, I believe Latino voters will save our state of California. I think we as a party just need to do a better job of actively welcoming them into our Republican tent. So what do you think of these numbers? What are you hearing?
100%. So, I mean, I think what we're seeing is over the last 4 presidential campaigns, you're seeing the Democratic support amongst Hispanic voters steadily erode. And I think it's going to be even more dramatic this particular go round. I was just looking at some interesting polling that was shared with me. We had actually a Latino candidate here last year in November in our local elections, and he was sharing some of his polling data. And it's very interesting because their number one concern by a long shot was the economy. Mm-hmm. This is what you and I have discussed, right? Wealthy white people aren't really impacted by this economy. But if you're just sort of coming up, if you're first generation, even second generation, I think you are much more directly impacted. You're more impacted by the crazy rise in gas prices. If you're trying to be a first time home buyer, the interest rates are really make home ownership impossible right now. So I think the fact that they care so much about the economy. And then the other thing, surprisingly, is they are really concerned about the border. They do
Yeah.
not like illegal immigration. Now, I think there is a bit of a conflict because what I'm hearing is that because here in Fairfax County, we have a very, very large Hispanic population. We're about 16% Hispanic in Fairfax County. So I have a lot of friends who are Hispanic and really engaged in different ways. And what I hear is they are upset by some things that Trump has said, his criticism of Bukele, and the fact that he talks about deporting without being specific about who's going to be deported. But overall, I think that they are really concerned that the Biden administration has just had a completely open border policy. Look, here in Fairfax County, and I think in many places around the country, it's really hurting our schools. And newer immigrants really depend on that good education to get a leg up, right? Also, having the gang culture come into the schools and come into communities. This is really impacting Hispanic families who are trying to raise their kids in this country. They do not like it. And yes, of course, fentanyl is just such a big issue. I told you the other day, I did an interesting sort of panel discussion with one of our congressional candidates. He's running for Mike Van Meter. He's running for the 11th district here in Virginia. Mm-hmm. He's actually an addiction counselor working in a local hospital system. And he talked so movingly and passionately about fentanyl and how we have to address this crisis. And you're right. The Biden administration has not managed to put a dent in it. And if anything, it's just gotten significantly worse under them. The point that Mike Van Meter made is every month, the number of fentanyl deaths is higher than the month before, and it hasn't gone down once.
So sad. And that affects everybody, whether you're an illegal immigrant, a legal immigrant, a United States citizen, whatever it is, that affects everybody equally. And, I think what was pretty eye-opening, and I do think you're seeing Latino support for President Trump, because I think that these are a group of people who have come here probably the right way, or even if they didn't, became a part of the system. And now you have so many of the people that are coming in here, they're criminals. They're not the best and brightest. And when President Trump calls them out, what does the left immediately say? They call him a racist. But the story that came out on Friday, and Bill Maloogian over at Fox News was a big piece of this. There was a letter written to Tony Gonzalez, a congressman who in April had asked ICE for sort of a breakdown of who was coming in the country, how many of them were criminals, how many of them were murderers, rapists, sexual offenders, how many of them were drug offenders. And well, he got the numbers. And if you believe them, and you probably have to admit these are undercounted because that's what everything in the Biden administration is, just about 500,000 people have come into this country who are convicted of a crime or have criminal charges pending against them. And those are just the ones that we know about, not the ones that have gotten away, not the ones that have snuck in through some hole somewhere. These are the ones that were in ICE custody and released into American cities. And so what do we have? We have a bunch of criminals that are now coming into the country who are not looking for a better way of life. They're looking to prey on our way of life. They're looking for an opportunity. The fact that, and I don't know who it is, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, I don't know anybody who could look at me and make a coherent argument, Katie, about why it's okay to let a convicted murderer into the country. But that's what's happened over 13,000 times, according to these numbers. Sexual assault or rapists, people let into the country coming in the tens of thousands. And nobody's blinking about that. And now you know why they're going to these blue cities, because they realize in places like Los Angeles or San Francisco or Chicago or New York that even if they get caught for their crimes again, they're not going to be deported because these are sanctuary cities. So you have criminals who are fully aware of our system, who are going to take advantage of it. And of course, that should make everybody furious, from the illegal immigrants who are here trying to do the right thing to the United States citizens who have been here for generations.
Yeah, and one of the really sad things about it, too, at least up here in this part of the world, is the fact that a lot of the crime that's being committed by these illegals, it's Hispanic on Hispanic crime. Mm-hmm. And so you're seeing that gang culture impacting other kids locally. You're seeing, and who knows what's driving it, because they don't always get into, the motivations. But when they talk about the perpetrators and the victims, I'm just seeing it's a lot of Hispanic on Hispanic crime. So for that reason as well, I think you're seeing a lot of Hispanics shift. They want law and order. They want a restoration of law and order in the country. As well, they want to see the economy flourish again.
And I think people are just tired. They're tired of feeling like they're not safe. We have on the ballot coming up in November in California, we have an amendment to Prop 47. And those of you who are outside of California have heard probably President Trump talk about this. Prop 47 is the law that allowed people to steal up to $900 worth of stuff, and it would be a misdemeanor, not a felony. And it meant that you could steal $900 worth of stuff multiple times a day, as many times as you want. Still a misdemeanor, never a felony. So no one was ever seeing the inside of a jail cell. And it's created a sense of lawlessness in California with smash and grab, retail theft, businesses are leaving the state. We have Prop 36 on our ballot, which is going to amend pieces of Prop 47. It's not going to fix it entirely, doesn't go far enough. But I saw the most encouraging polling. And remember, California, we're at over 40% Latino. So this is why I bring this up during this piece, is that we are truly a melting pot when it comes, especially when we talk about Latino voters in California. The new polling on Prop 36 indicates that 71% of California is going to support that initiative. Now,
wow,
that is huge. For me, that is the best piece of news that you could tell me in California, because it means that Democrats, who are the majority in the state, independents, Republicans are all coming together to say enough is enough. And it's a story that can be cobbled together if we can get this thing passed to tell the rest of the country, the rest of the people on the left, these elected officials, that enough is enough. Even in very, very blue California, you can push it too far and people are going to snap it back and have some sanity and make it so that if you steal more than 3 times under $900 worth of stuff, they'll start looking at you for felony offenses. That makes sense. You don't get to do things like this over and over again. So I was so encouraged to see that 71% of voters are looking to pass this. And this is with the entire Democrat supermajority legislature working against it, trying to get this pulled from the ballot. Gavin Newsom tried to create legislation and lawsuits to try to pull this initiative off the ballot, but everything has failed. It's there, it's printed, it's going to press, and the bulk of the population in California supports it. So there is some good news when people get pushed far enough, Latino voters or otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of New York back in the day in the 70s and 80s when the lawlessness just got out of hand, and people got really upset about it. And you also realize all these policies have profound consequences, right? Mm-hmm. And this is one of the reasons why conservatives don't like a lot of government policies, because there are always unintended consequences that are hard to predict. But you allow, you think you're doing people a favor by loosening up the law, but no, it leads to a whole culture of lawlessness, which then has all other kinds of ramifications. So I think it's great news. Pray that this goes through. No
funny business. Exactly. Yeah. And, primarily it is these communities of color, the Latino communities, the Black communities who get hit the hardest by these policies that were created by white elitists to try to make things better for them.
Oh, well, and one of the, I think, worst ramifications has been a lot of neighborhoods now don't have pharmacies because the pharmacies were getting hit so often. They had to close.
I walked there was a story that just became, I think it probably got national attention. If you walk into Rite Aids or CVS now, it's almost like everything is behind plastic.
I know. Yep.
There's a, I think it was a Walgreens or a Rite Aid I think it might've been Long Beach, that literally every item in the store is behind plastic. And that picture went viral. This is what California has turned into. The warning signs here are really important because this is what's on tap for the rest of the country if we don't stop the craziness right now.
We were in a big pharmacy. I don't remember the chain now. Maybe it was a CVS out in Seattle. And it was not only was everything behind glass, but they had at least 3 security guards on the ground level and then more elsewhere. And they said it's not just the thefts, it's everything. It's the stabbings, it's everything that goes on. That is nuts.
Absolutely. Well, it is always great to catch up. And we went through some of the news today. We really appreciate all of your support for our podcast. We are really growing, and it's all because of all of you. So please continue to help us out with 5-star reviews, sharing Happy Women with your friends, and connecting with us on all of our platforms. You can go to SalemPodcastNetwork.com to connect with us everywhere. And of course, you should get Katie's book. It's called Next Gen Marxism. It's available wherever you get your books. You can also check her out online, katiegorka.org. You can search for her on Facebook. Just look for Catherine Gorka, and on X, Gorka Katie. And you can find me online too, Instagram and Facebook, Jennifer Horn Radio, and X, and on Truth at Jennifer Horn. Thank you all for joining us. It's another episode of the Happy Women Podcast.